I am getting thumbs up at the camera, which I believe means we are live. So, as is custom, I will wait to see someone say in chat that they can hear me, and then we will get started. This is my favorite part of the stream, the intro section where I just talk to myself. Hey, people can hear me. Hello, everybody, and welcome to DevStream number 5. We are back talking about Expeditions Rome today. We have Jonas again with us. Hey, Jonas, how are you today?
Yeah, hi, I'm glad to be here again. I've been very excited about this one. We were
You
on,
are.
huh?
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, we were on vacation for a couple of weeks a while back, so it's really good to be back in the studio and hammering at it. I was working a bit over the vacation, but yeah, it's good to have everyone back in the studio.
I see you are sporting the brand new swag that I'm quite jealous of. Yes.
Yes, I picked this up as well over the vacation. Yeah, it arrived, I think a week before we went away. So yeah, it's cool.
I know that supposedly mine is in the mail, so hopefully next stream I'll be able to join you on that. That shirt looks badass. I really like
I
it.
hope so as well. Yeah, I like the
Yeah.
red one. We got another one as well, but this one has the actual name, so I decided to wear this one.
Oh, I don't think I've seen the red one actually. I think I've only seen that one.
Okay, well I think you're getting one of each, so you can choose.
Oh, sweet. So we'll have to coordinate so we don't wear the same one.
Yeah.
Like going to a
Well,
party wearing the same thing.
sure, like a couple that shows up, yeah.
Yeah.
Dressed the same. It's awkward.
Awesome. Well, we have a good conversation today. We're talking about metagame, which is always a fun topic. It's the grander things, and we have a lot of metagame stuff in Expeditions Realm to go through, so we had to kind of chunk it apart into sections. So today we'll kind of talk about a couple of different things that are more larger scope. Where we'll touch on a few topics, but the main focus is going to be on the Legion battles, which we got some questions on our community site today. We'll be able to go through, which is super exciting. As you can see down in the, and if I point, I think it's on this way. We have community.expeditionsseries.com, which is the website that you can go to plug into the community and read our dev diaries. So Dev Diary 5 was posted earlier this week, and that'll give you a chance to see and read in more detail some of the things we're going to talk about today. But we'll go through some extra stuff. We'll talk about a few things. So welcome everyone, and I think it's going to be a fun stream. I'm excited to dive into metagame.
Yeah, it was a big one this time. The dev diary. I realized that as I was getting through it, I had to cut down a bunch of it. That's why we ended up also splitting it into two.
Yeah, I remember when you sent me the first draft, and you're like, "This guy is already a monster, so I may need to cut it here." And
Yeah.
we renamed it midstream. It's like, I'm still kind of writing. Should I just stop?
Yeah.
So, I mean, for people that don't know, what do we mean by metagame? What is that? I know it's I'm not saying it's like a developer-y term, because I know a lot of gamers do know what it means. But for those that may not, what does metagame mean? How do we define that?
Yeah, it's one of those terms that can also change description a little bit based on what genre you're working in. But it's basically everything that isn't the core game loop. So if you can think of, like, if you're trying to describe a game to someone, you can ask, like, what do you do second to second, what do you do minute to minute, and what do you do hour by hour. And the meta game really is about what you're doing hour by hour. In this case, you're making decisions about your character progression that will take you all the way from level 1 to level maximum. You're making strategic decisions about how you want to conquer the regions and so on. So it's all the sort of grand scale game length decisions that you're making.
So I wonder how many people in chat knew that. I'm kind of curious if it was that a new thing for you to learn, or is that something that many of you already knew? Did you already know what metagame was? You can respond in chat. It'd be great to just know how educated our audience is, right? So what would, as an interesting counterpoint, what would be our core game loop, so we can kind of separate between the two?
So the core game loop, there's a couple of different layers to the game. There's combat, where the core game loop is all about, selecting which skill to use on which target, trying to clump up your enemies, trying to maneuver your own people to get them into the positions you want, and figuring out how to go for the victory conditions and how to keep your people alive, how to split your attention between, here's what I need to do to win the mission, here's what I need to do to kill enemies and not die myself. Outside of combat, the core game loop would be navigating the level, looking for loot, talking to people. Then in dialogue, you have, picking dialogue options, deciding how to treat someone, how are they going to respond to what you're saying, and all these kind of things.
Yeah.
That would be the second to second and minute to minute kind of decisions that you're making.
You're talking about dialogue, and we already, the third comment on today's stream is already a big Fosse fan. So I don't know. It seems like Fosse is just like he has fangirls and fanboys that show up on these
He's
streams
got
and
his
talk
own
about it.
little fan club that follows him around and comments on everything.
I know. We need to have like
Right.
the Fosse fan stream, I guess. I
Yeah.
didn't realize it was such a big thing, but maybe we were doing this wrong. We should just.
He's a whole celebrity, I guess, national celebrity in Turkey. He runs the whole Turkish games.
Yeah, right, the Turkey Star. So when it comes to ours, I guess what you're really talking about in the bigger picture stuff, we have like leveling, exploring, the war count we've talked about. Those are all kind of falling into that metagame category versus kind of that turn-based combat or kind of that specific. I know in the dev diary you called them like self-contained features versus features that kind of extend across multiple arcs of the game experience.
Yeah. Obviously, one of our goals when designing any game, but especially an expeditions game, is to make sure that everything connects to each other as much as possible. So each of these self-contained systems, they're not as self-contained, right? Because they are informed by the metagame, and they also talk to each other to some extent. But you can think of them as little bubbles of content that mostly, like when you're in combat, and you don't need to worry about anything else. But what you have access to in combat, of course, is very much informed by the decisions you've made in the meta. You get which skills you have, which weapons you have, what kind of injuries your characters have, and sometimes the combat begins in different ways depending on what decisions you made in dialogue and so on. So it's never as simple as it sounds when you try to dissect it from like a game dev's standpoint, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, Yak Truck 123, Sir Falwick, welcome to the stream. Join the Fosse fan club, I guess. Maybe we need to get like hashtag Fosse fan club t-shirts as well. So you broke the theming of this metagame conversation into two kind of main parts, which are character systems and world map systems. So what do we mean by, I mean, it may be obvious, and if it is obvious, chat, tell me and we'll move on really quick. But what do we consider character metagame?
The character systems would be anything that relates directly to the progression of your own character throughout the game. This is the package of features that most people think of when they have to define an RPG. Like if you ask someone what is an RPG, what are RPG mechanics, they will mention leveling up, buying skills, finding loot, upgrading weapons, deciding a loadout, everything that's basically about creating a build of a character that grows in power and complexity throughout the course of the game.
And you see this fall into that era too.
Crafting is one of the features that really straddle the line between the two, the sort of very artificial divide that I've made just to be able to write this dev diary in less than like 8 pages. Of course, there's a lot of interaction between the two sides because it is kind of an artificial division. But crafting does belong to the kind of world map feature set, but it is
a hard question, guys. Look at that. See, I'm already challenging him. He's like,
Yeah, I would classify it as a character progression system mainly because
okay.
it does allow you to upgrade items, craft new items, and so on that are specifically to progress your character.
So on the world map side, then we're talking about some of the bigger things like the war camps and the legion system and what else kind of falls into that world map metagame?
The entire structure of the game is built around military campaigns. So the overall narrative is that you're a Roman commander on a campaign of war, and so all of the features that we have relate to that somehow. It's about the different regions of control on the world map and how you move through the world map, how you gradually eat up all the enemy sectors until you control the whole thing. Your legion itself, managing it, recruiting replacement legionary for it when you've done poorly in a fight, or when you've done quite well but it was an expensive victory. Then there is the outpost upgrades themselves, as we also mentioned in the dev diary. So you have this camp that your legion sets up every time they stop somewhere. Like there's these strategic locations you can control, and when you visit that camp, it has a bunch of buildings and so on that you can visit. So in high level terms, it's all of these systems related to the strategic conquest of each level or each campaign.
Yeah, and I know that we have some video playing right now of some of that world map gameplay. Sir Falwick asked a good question, which I think is even a good comparison question to previous expedition games. He asked, will there be big cities? And there was one big city. I mean, there's a couple cities in Vikings, but there was one like really big city. How does the Rome cities compare in that, I guess?
They are roughly the same size. So geographically, I haven't compared in a while actually. They feel the same size. I'd say we have more of them, and they have a better distribution of content, in my opinion. Like that was a bit of an issue with. I think you might either be thinking of York or Ribe in Viking,
Yeah.
and there was definitely a difficulty with creating enough content to fill those big levels. There was also an issue where, especially Ribe, just ended up being very samey. The layout of it was very it was just like a maze of identical houses. So we've done a lot to make sure that the districting in our levels this time are a bit better. And we have a bigger team and we've had more time. So now there's more and more interesting content in those levels.
Yes, denser. And I think that's a good like there's a term of scale across all of things, not just cities, even when it comes to the metagame, because there's some big differences in how we've approached some of these metagame systems from games like Viking Rome. I know something that comes up a lot in previous dev streams, and I'm sure some people here, if we talk long enough, would bring it up, was those metagame systems about in Viking specifically about camping and having to go hunt and heal and all those aspects. And I remember in a previous diary and in stream we were talking about how we've really focused on kind of revamping some of those and making them a little bit different, because you're now managing a full legion. And I think as you said, even the text is a full legion plus 5. It doesn't really make that much of a difference. A camping for 5 people when you're feeding 5,000 doesn't, okay, like that shouldn't be hard.
Yeah, exactly. I try not to focus too much on what's different from the previous games normally, because I don't want to turn anyone off. But since you've given me permission, in previous expeditions games, we definitely had this. We were hinting at there being an army, right? We wanted you to have an army in the narrative because it was historically accurate. Like Cortez did have about 500 people with him in Mexico when he beat the Aztecs. The great heathen army that invaded England and took over most of the country was about 1,000 people. Even then, the scale is much bigger in Rome, right? A legion is 6,000 people, 4,800 fighting men, and then all of their support structure. So we wanted you to have control of an entire legion, and I don't want to spoil anything, but it goes a bit beyond that at some point in the game as well. So we had to really rethink what we wanted to do, and not focus the world map so much on survival as we had in previous games. It was very much about entering this uncharted territory and having to fight nature and animals as much as the actual enemy in the story. This time it's much more focused on the war and the conquest, and we wanted to create that sense that you're a commander and you have this huge military structure at your beck and call. So that also had the knock-on effect that it's much less about the sort of chore and tedium of staving off all these dangers. Like Viking and especially Conquistador very, very much hammered down the sort of anything can kill you. You're in danger everywhere, and things just keep going wrong, and you just have to try and mitigate the damage. And Rome isn't as much about that. When you go to the camp, it's not really to try and stave off disaster. It's because there are things in the camp that you can use to get new items, to get advantages in battle, and so on. So it's much more of a positive thing in a way, and that also means it gets a bit less tedious over time.
Yeah, I feel like, and Trek, I see your question about the conquest areas. We're gonna grab that one in our next segment, because we do talk about how you conquer the map and what that is. So I definitely saw it. We'll grab that one. I feel like we basically shifted the fantasy to what's appropriate for this topic, because I feel like there's new things like we've definitely I don't want to say lost, but there are some aspects of like the camp thing that we've changed or replaced with different features like the Legion battle system, which really tie into the fantasy of you being a legate and commanding this legion and going out there and trying to subdue it. Well, I say subdue, but conquer a region. I guess subdue, bring it under Rome's control. So I think that fantasy does kind of play into how we've tuned these features. And I honestly, personally, because I felt though I liked some of those aspects of the previous expedition games, I feel like Rome has laser focused in on where fun is, as opposed to having things that as you're progressing through a 50+ hour RPG start feeling a little tedious. It's like I feel like I should be past this point, but I'm still having to go out and like hunt for food per se, and it's like that has no longer as entertaining as doing other things. So I feel like that progression in the metagame feels a little more organic and engaging now, at least in how we've structured it.
That's another part of it as well, because Conquistador, I think, was about 30 hours to play through, and Viking was about the same, maybe 40-ish hours at most. Even then, the camping mechanics got quite repetitive after a while, and you could sort of find a setup you liked and just keep going, but you still had to keep going through the motions at very frequent intervals. With Rome, it's even longer, right? I think we just found out today that it takes like 65-ish hours to play through the whole game. You would absolutely get bored out of your mind having to keep doing those camping chores. So it was very important for us to eliminate that. A lot of the camping stuff that was in Viking was already sort of vestigial at the time. Like, is Great Britain in the Viking Age, is it really as dangerous as the jungles of Mexico in the Renaissance? Probably not, right? But we still had those systems. We just added to them instead of taking a step back and going like, does this even still make sense, or do we need to rethink our meta? And that's the step we took in Rome. We wanted to make sure that everything was in accordance with the core fantasy of the game.
Yeah, and I feel like some of those things have definitely tie into how the world map, or the world map, but how the war camp works, because the war camp has some of those things present in it. You just interact with them differently. And I feel like
The war camp,
you have like you definitely have the sense of maintaining your legion and making sure everything for the legion is properly structured. Then you have the upgrades that you do there as part of the meta. So there is still that sense of progression and like not, I won't say survival, but providing and strategizing on how you're going to make sure everything with the war camp is functioning the way it needs to have a machine of war running across Greece or North Africa or whatever.
The war camp is very much a direct evolution of the homestead system in Viking, where we wanted to give you the sense that you had a home base, that was the reason for you to go out and raid and pillage. You wanted to bring riches back to your village, so you needed to actually see the effect of that. But most people didn't even realize that they could go back to Denmark during that, like, because there was no indication. It felt like a big step, sailing across the ocean and getting to Britain. There was no indication that actually you can just go back anytime you want. Like, it wasn't really signposted very well. So this time you bring that with you. Like, you always have the outposts following along with you as the Legion moves. As long as you keep the Legion moving, then the outpost is wherever the Legion is, and you can return to it. And you'll visit it much more frequently than you visited the homestead in Viking. And its upgrades also impact the gameplay a lot more. Like, we have more upgrades that actually unlock features, systems, or just have really obvious advantages in the other game systems as well. So it feels much more integrated.
So what are the kind of things that you do in the war camp? Like what are the actions the player takes there?
Other than talking to your companions, you'll always find them standing around, kind of having.
I think that's a really cool thing to bring up, because I mean, this is not really metagame, so we're digressing in it. But it's one thing that I didn't really feel like in the previous games. You had that kind of hub where you also kind of got to know your companions better. I mean, I'm just gonna name drop another title. Like, I feel like the war camp in Rome feels a lot like the Normandy does in Mass Effect, where you actually go back and you talk to people and have those conversations, and you feel like you're getting to know a little bit more about their backstory, and you feel there's functional reasons to go back, but when you go back for those functional reasons, there's also narrative and kind of character development reasons, which I absolutely love. I think we're trying to add more. We'll see if we do, but like I love that aspect of enrichment in the narrative.
Yeah, the Normandy has been a touchstone for us. Please don't sue us, Bioware. But I've also had a lot of fun, like, creating little encounters where people come to you in camp. Like, when you visit camp, maybe there's someone who showed up to talk to you about a specific thing, and you have to make a decision, or somebody needs to seek an audience with you, essentially, as you're kind of the military authority in the area. So there's a lot of narrative going on there. There's also a lot of little overheard conversations as you walk around and just listen to your soldiers, what they're talking about. They usually they'll be commenting on new buildings you've added, or progress you've made in the main storyline, or talking about your companions and interesting things that they've done. So in addition to all of this narrative content,
As I digress, sorry, go ahead.
No, it's cool. I mean, that is also one of my favorite things about the outpost. But it does have
I'd be
gameplay.
curious how many people of the people in chat who played Mass Effect, how many of them went back and talked to everybody every time between missions in Normandy, and how many just like, nah, I'm gonna keep going. I know what kind of player I was. I was actually very, very, very self-disciplined to try to talk to him in between every single step. I want to hear every story that I could.
Yeah. But you are extending the tangent, Brad.
Sorry.
It's fine. So you can replenish your items, for example, like when you spend your tactical items, they kind of deplete. You have to come back to camp to get those charges refreshed. You can craft new items for yourself, obviously. When you build certain buildings, you can start developing, I guess we should say, new stratagems that you can use in Legion battles, which is something we also touched on in the dev stream, in the dev diary. You can leave someone behind if you build baths. Sometimes, if you make certain decisions, followers' morale might drop a little low, like their approval of you drops because they feel like you're not aligned with their values. If you want to keep them around instead of just dismissing them and replacing them, you can send them to the baths to rest and recuperate, and gradually their approval rises again up to a certain point. Like there's kind of a limit to how much you can replenish there. And of course, it's also where you come back to recruit new Praetorians if you lost someone, or to replenish the manpower of your legion, which costs you money. You have to recruit them, but so that you can keep your conquest going. This is just some of the examples.
Yeah, I feel like it really does become this kind of extension of all those different systems, because you have like you said, earlier on, the narrative system is self-contained in a sense that the decisions you're making when you're talking to someone are about progressing the narrative and the plot right then and there. But to the point where everything connects to like a larger metagame feature, some of those decisions impact the morale of your partners or Praetorians or your friends, and you may need to be like, hey, just go have a vacation for a couple days, like go take some time off in the bath, and that's where it sequences into that war camp metagame. And I think that it's a very, if it works well, it feels very natural and organic, but it is a very conscious decision to try to find connecting points between the core loops and how it drives purpose to those bigger systems. As designers, it's a very interesting balancing act. So it's like, it doesn't seem, this is punny, it doesn't seem campy, like it doesn't seem contrived, but it still does have those ties together.
Yeah, it can be very difficult not to make it feel contrived, but I think it's also part of what makes this kind of game so difficult to develop, because it comes together quite late. Things didn't really start to come together until I guess around half a year ago, and then you could see all of these systems were finally in place, and things started to make sense. Parts of the gameplay that just weren't playable before because an entire system was missing suddenly came into focus. So it makes things a lot more complicated when everything has to be interconnected in that way, and it makes the dev diaries really long when you have to write about them.
Yeah. By the way, DJIS my good lord, Digsmay69. I don't even know how to pronounce your name. I'm sorry, but yeah, we can't talk about ME3's ending. That's like, there's some topics you just can't talk about, and that's one of them. Maybe if I ever meet you in person, we'll talk about it, but not on stream.
We strive to do better.
Yeah. Isma. Okay, perfect. Yeah, but yeah. So we're gonna move on to Legion battles. I'm gonna grab one random question that I think is very applicable to what we were just talking about. So, Sir Thalwick, who's nailing the questions by the way today so far, asked if we can upgrade our soldiers, our Praetorians. Like, is there a way to progress them?
The legionaries in the Legion are more of like a resource, and in the sense that they level up, it's that the Legion gains experience, and experience counts towards your strength in battle as well. And you can actually spend experience as a resource as well. Like if you use your Legion a lot on missions that aren't really battle, like they're building infrastructure or diplomatic missions or whatever, they will lose some experience because they're not really actively fighting. But yeah, you will find that the Legion levels up, and then the buildings that you build in the outpost can also give bonuses to your legion and to the stratagems that you play. So in that sense, yeah, but you don't micromanage 4,800 individual soldiers. That would be a bit much. You can then recruit praetorians, which are your elite legionaries that enter your combat group and follow you around, and they are fully fleshed out RPG characters with equipment and skill points and all this stuff that you're used to.
So we're about to, though, in a sense, like you don't level up your legion per se, but there is a Roland the Dwarf, good to see you. There is, and we're about to talk about legion battles specifically. There are functional stratagems, we call them stratagems, functional things that you get that you can deploy during legion battles that you do progressively get more of or better versions of as you go on. In a way, it's an abstracted leveling system in the sense that you're not like leveling up your legion from like level 3 to level 4 and unlocking all this stuff, but your legion does get more proficient and gets more complex ways to approach a battle, and that opens up more options. So which I think is really organic. I think it's kind of cool that you're basically just studying and getting better at doing war, and as you're doing that, your options in war expand.
The stratagems are quite cool, yeah, I think. They are slightly randomized to sort of represent the unpredictability of war. Like some stratagems are just not applicable in some situations. Obviously, they might depend on the weather, the layout, the layout of the battlefield, right? The behavior and makeup of the enemy army. So you get a certain number of stratagems to choose from each time there's a choice in battle. And these stratagems are from a pool that you can influence to some extent. You can add new cards to it. You can upgrade the stratagems that are in there as you level up your workshop. So yeah, you will find that your options improve and also become more. They gain extra effects that make the choices a little more nuanced. And you have to, in the end, kind of decide what kind of tactics you want to deploy, like what kind of strategic, because you have to choose between which upgrades to pick when you level up a stratagem. So do I go for the one that will boost my legion's morale so that I can maybe burn that morale in other contexts, or do I want to like make a very defensive kind of strategic makeup, or do I want to go for a more aggressive attitude and so on? So it sort of changes the feel of how your legion behaves in battle.
So we're talking around some of these aspects that are tying to the Legion battle system. Let's just dive right into the details.
Yeah.
So I think it'll add a lot more clarity when we talk about the context here. So first off, I mean, this really starts with how the world map is set up, because these world maps are broken into different regions, and you know, it's I guess the Legion battles are really important to the progression of the game, right? I mean, that's part of how it's structured.
It is. The main story even hinges on your progress on the conquest. As you complete your sub goals in conquest, like as you conquer more and more regions, you are prompted with the main quest. Like you might get a messenger inviting you to do something, or a new opportunity opens up. So it does frame the main story in a way. And as you say, the world map is divided into all these different regions. At the beginning of a campaign, all of the regions will be hostile except for the one where you gained a foothold with your legion. And you can only attack adjacent regions. Each region has different resources that it can supply when you take it over. You then have to send your legion to secure these resources. So it does matter a little bit which way you take through the world map. And then once you've conquered all of the regions in a certain area, it triggers a siege, which we will get into in a later dev stream, I think.
Yeah, it is a whole different thing. YetTrack123 asked, do you have a limited time for conquest, or can you just
have
do that?
We have heard you. You do not like timers. Loud and clear. There is unlimited time for conquest. But of course, if you just sit idle, the enemy will attack you as well, and you'll get options for how to deal with that. In a lot of cases, it's just a matter of making sure that there's a legion where the attack will happen to defend that region. But there'll be extra little things that you can do to give that legion some bonuses, some defensive bonuses, or sabotage the enemy army a little bit. But the enemy is not just sitting there waiting for you to steamroll them.
Yeah, that's where that kind of ties to YetTrack's question earlier about areas that you've conquered be lost? Can the enemy retake them? And the answer is absolutely yes. I mean, there is a little bit of a tug of war. Obviously, they're not super aggressive. We want the player to progress. It's not like a it's really more of a motivator, so you don't just sit still. But there is some gameplay there around like being mindful of your territory and making sure you have it in play. But this really ties into a broader question that I think is really important to clarify, which is not really when you look at the map and see all those little nodes and everything, you almost get this sense like it's like a 4X kind of game where you're expanding and taking over territories. But that's not really how it works. I mean, there's a little bit of sprinkles of that, but it's different.
It's more like a frame for the RPG, right? It's a way of representing the strategic decisions and the Legion command, but it's not the main focus of the game. So it is it is much more streamlined than you'd expect from a 4X game. There's not like, you don't have to read a 1,000-page manual to work this stuff out. It's fairly straightforward in the end. You'll get the hang of it quite quickly, I think. But
and
still,
even then, like I think Isma made a comment, which is this is a good example where we kind of simplified things because it's not the main focus. It's a metagame system. It's not the core game. It's really just you versus one side in each of the regions. You're not like having different factions you're trying to fight against each other. And I mean, though that sounded interesting, and I think actually that we talked about some of those layers of complexity at one point in time, the game is really about the core mechanics are about that turn-based gameplay and the narrative decisions you're making. And if we just kept on adding more and more core gameplay, then the game would just, I mean, it's already massive enough as it is. So we did make some decisions here and there, like, no, I mean, this is fun and it makes you feel like you're controlling an army, but we're not making civilization. We're not going that far with it.
One of the things that one of the decisions we made early on as well was we wanted to avoid this cliche almost RPG dynamic that Viking very much fell into, which is you end up working for everyone else. Like, you show up as this band of rampaging Vikings, and your first order of business is walk up to the Northumbrian king and basically ask, is there anything I can do for you, sir? Right? Not really what you'd expect from Viking raiders, but it's how RPGs work, right? Oh, where is the quest giver? Click on him, get a quest. We wanted to avoid that with Rome. We wanted to make sure that you're working for Rome and for yourself. You're a commander, and the quests come from strategic opportunities. They're suggested by your people, and they just arise naturally out of the progression of conquest. So you won't really be, you will be working with factions in the local areas. Like, you will be allying with certain tribes in Nasamones, for example, to kind of get them on your side, get access to local resources you might not otherwise have. But you're not going to be taking quests from them. They're not going to be dictating the course of your war, right? You're Roman and you're there to conquer. And that also ties
that's a really good part to clarify, because I know someone was asking about like I'm not going to talk too much about this because it is kind of a spoiler kind of topic, but your progression through the game from like starting off as kind of a sergeant or a lieutenant to a legate, and then honestly eventually to becoming more than a legate, but I'm not going to say too much about that. We wanted the player to feel like they were that powerhouse. I mean, you're a Roman leader with an army at your back, and the world fears you to a certain degree. So just going to a guy and being like, hey, want me to go like find some cherries to bring back for your cherry festival, whatever it may be, that sounded kind of lame. It's not like kind of, you should be the one at least somewhat driving those decisions, not just like doing spoken hub quest kind of experiences.
That was one of our main rules when it came to writing side quests, especially, is they would always talk to you about things where you would go to the general of an army to get help with this. So nothing in terms of, oh, my rival merchant is pissing me off, go mess with his stall, right? That's not something you ask a general to do. It's more like
Holmes says here, he's like, yeah, I know the ravenous cannibal horde is coming, but can you please get the cat out of the tree for me for a second? Like, stuff like that is it feels a little contrived.
And that doesn't mean that there's not less high stakes side quests for you to do, but we've made an effort to make it feel natural, and make it actually feel like they have a reason to come to you about this stuff, and they need someone as powerful and important as you, for the most part. And of course, there's the occasional divergence from that, but we won't get into that.
Yeah. So I think so you've now ordered a legion, or your legion, to go and conquer a legion. Conquer a region. Legion region is close, right? That's a little bit of a tongue twist. So you order a legion to conquer a region. The legion gets there, and that's where these legion battles kick in. So walk us through kind of the high level. We're going to dive into the details, but what is a legion battle like? What are the parameters here, and how do they work?
The first choice really comes before you order the attack. You have to make sure that your legion is led by a group of centurions, centurions with a hard C. That's how Latin works. Took me a while to work out. You can have 4 of them assigned to the legion at a time, and each of them has a specific character class that would also have come out if you had recruited them for your Praetorian party instead. That would have been their combat role. But in battle, it also affects their performance. You'll find that certain classes create slightly different effects in battle, and some of them also have specific perks that make them better suited to be in charge. Like they might give you better defense, or they might give you fewer injuries among your legionary. When you then launch the battle, you have to pick which one of them should be the commander. The other ones are still there. They can still die if you make certain decisions, but the commander is the one whose class and perks determine how the battle is going. Then you have to pick your formation, which is a stratagem. So there's certain types of stratagems for different phases of combat, and the first phase is the formation phase, where you determine how to deploy your army, which does show on the battle map. You can see the actual formation arrayed against the enemy. As you then go through that phase, it's automated. You see the outcome of all of these things, all of these choices you made. How does that play out during this phase? You can skip it after a while if you get tired of looking at the animations, but it's fun to kind of follow along and see how it goes and go, no, he failed this challenge. Like he got attacked and he didn't do anything about it. So you can sit there and be annoyed at your commander. Then comes when the armies have then reached each other, comes the engagement phase, which gives you another set of stratagems to choose between. There's another phase, and then a complication happens. And the complication phase changes a lot. It can be something good, it can be something bad, and that changes which stratagems you get access to. You'll find that if something bad happens to you, like the enemy cavalry charges, the stratagems you have to choose from are not necessarily a choice you want to make. It's kind of like you're stuck between a rock and a hard place. But as you start upgrading those, the penalties can go down, and you start actually finding that you can turn those things to your advantage once you've upgraded your stratagems enough. But if something good happens, like the one of the enemy maniples or units are breaking, and you have to follow up on that, then it's a much more positive situation for you. And then finally, the battle is over. Either you won or lost, and you actually get a new set of stratagems as well, for choosing how you want to react to that, how you want to mitigate the damage if you lost, or how you want to follow through on your victory if you won.
Yeah, and there's kind of there's really at its core a tug of war going on between how many soldiers are alive on both sides. Like there's this you have your number of soldiers and the enemy's number of soldiers, and sometimes you may sacrifice some soldiers on an earlier stratagem to really push an advantage, so that you can knock down the enemy faster and be in a better spot for later on in those different choices you're making. So there's a lot of that kind of how you maximize. And there's also, I guess, kind of 3 main results, or I guess things you're managing when you're going through this. The total troops that you've lost, the loot range, because at the end of the day you do get some rewards for finishing these fights, and then if your Praetorian or your commander survived or not.
It's all about balancing those risks. There's a specific initial risk to your centurions that you want to try and keep that low, but sometimes it makes sense to just sacrifice a centurion in order to save many more of your legionary. I think we have a quite well balanced set of factors that we're tracking to give you that sort of tactical depth. One of the things I'm really pleased with that we got in is missing in action legionary. So after the battle, a certain number of legionary will just be missing because battle is chaotic and you don't know what happened to them. Either they died or they're just AWOL. And you can't replace those. They're basically like a permanent debuff to your maximum manpower until you find out what happened to them. So a lot of time they just show up again and they were like, yeah, we're fine. We made our way back. And then they are added back to your pool. But I like that because it represents something that you don't often see in games, which is a lot of the time people don't die, they just go missing in battle, right? And I think that's really fun that we did in that. And so balancing all
And
these factors gives a lot of personality to your choices, I think.
And I think something I like about it, because I think sometimes, yeah, they went for a stroll. That's right, barely tactical. They're
Exactly.
just like, let's go check out the mountains of Greece. I'll see you
I
guys in
do
a little while.
not. I do not want to charge the enemy pike formation. Actually, maybe we should just get lost in this direction.
Yeah, that's right. I think the river looks nice for a swim. I'll see you guys
Yeah.
after the fight. Good luck. I also really like the fantasy aspect of it in the sense that we didn't want to. This is really about being that legatus, right? Like you are the general, so you're not getting into like ordering individual units. You have your lieutenants, your
Centurions.
the centurions that are out there making those decisions for you. So you're more appointing people to do the minute to minute combat, and you're making those big strategy decisions at the higher level. And even though it's a little bit also to kind of like save on scope, it's a lot of it does, for me at least, tie into that fantasy, because I want to have that moment. I mean, I have the other part of the turn-based combat where I'm very visceral and intimate, and you're making the decisions about who you attack, and that's more of that turn-based strategy. And in this one, you step back and you feel like, okay, I'm commanding a legion, and this is a very different tier of thing. And we see a lot of people in the different, like, whether it be chat here or even in some of our video comments about like, how are you going to communicate that fantasy of being a legatus? And I think this is where this really does come out. You are not just that tactical squad. There's another layer there. I think that's really, really cool.
It's also about trying to create some kind of emergent stories for you, like having those centurions assigned to the legion, which are actual characters with portraits and names and so on. That gives you a chance to be sad when they die, right? Like you might actually care about one of them if he has like a really unique perk that you haven't been able to find for anyone else. Losing him can sting, and he might have carried you through a lot of battles, and now you have to replace him. So putting a face and a name on it is a way to get a bit more storytelling in there, which is what
I love how Yet Trek 123 asks, and these are the kind of questions that always come up, like, can I punish the people that fail me? I don't think we can punish them right now. Maybe there's something we should explore adding. It's like, no, you did that wrong. Slap. Like now you a little bit demoralized, but maybe like a bonus to the next fight that they lead. Like they lose morale but gain like fortitude or something like that. I don't know.
That could be that could be a stratagem you can play after the battle, right? When you've won or lost, maybe it's like if you have a certain amount of missing legionary, you can like discipline them, you can decimate them or something. That could be cool.
It's a cool idea. So I feel like there's another point that we need to clarify, which is that we've talked about this before. You have your core companions, and they're named characters that are. I mean, everything is fully voiced, but they're uniquely voiced, and they have a very comprehensive backstory. Your companions can't lead these battles. These battles are led by the Praetorians that you're recruiting, that you're growing, and you can use those Praetorians in turn-based combat too. I mean, they have, like Jonas mentioned before, fully fleshed out character sheets, and they can have equipment and everything. But they are to a certain degree designed to be for running those Legion battles. You have to find these characters and level them up, name them if you want, or take the names for them and use them in that way. So I think it's important to clarify that, because you're not going to send Seneros to go and lead that battle. It's someone that's actually trained up to be this soldier and to lead these men in a larger war.
I don't want to go on too much of a tangent here either, but I think it is worth mentioning as well how these Praetorians, non-companion Praetorians, we call them, is a little unwieldy, how they generally tie into the game. We've always had the opportunity to recruit these less story-driven characters. In Viking, they were called mercenaries, but there wasn't really any incentive to use them in Viking. You could manage to find you always using your companions. In Rome, as part of the conquest system, once you've taken a region, you have to pacify it. Pacification can be a legion mission, where it's just you send your legion to go and
you're opening a can of worms right there. That's a whole different topic.
Yeah, I won't go into too much detail on it, but sometimes you have to send one of your companions in charge of some generic Praetorians to handle that. So that means you have to pay attention to these guys. You have to actually keep them leveled and give them reasonably good equipment so you can make it through those pacification missions, because you just don't have time to go with your elite Praetorian party and handle all these things yourself.
Yektrek, he is full of gold today. He or she, sorry, I'm not sure which, but he made a comment that says, "They will be more afraid of me than of the enemy." And Burly Tactical responds back and says, "Spoken like a true Roman leader." So I almost feel like, and I mean, not that I'm trying to scope creep here at this point, but I mean, you should be able to punish a Praetorian. Like, I can imagine you coming back and being like, you know what? This guy has failed me as a coward. I'm going to massacre him. And all of like the fear mongering trait goes up. So all the people that like that stuff get excited. The ones that don't. And you get a temporary boost to your next Legion combat. But you also lose like a lot. There's an interesting like tug of war where it's like, am I playing the fantasy of the Legatus who everyone is just terrified of? And like, I'm making all those hard decisions. Is there a way to also, I don't think we've actually done that very much. I wonder if there's opportunities there to inject some of that ruthlessness into how you manage your Legion.
The Legion does have a morale stat that tracks how pleased they are with how things are going, basically. And using that resource is another part of making these strategic choices. Yeah, maybe there's an opportunity there for you to make an example of someone to gain some morale or something like that. We can probably find a way to do it without adding a whole new feature set.
That'd be, I mean, if you're playing the fantasy of that brutal, like you're taking the hard line. For some reason, people always want those options. I think there's this part of like that darker fantasy of wanting to just play the brutal dictator-ish Legato. So interesting.
Yeah, I'll think about it. I mean, we are still working on the system and trying to figure out just how to wrap it up and make it feel as good as it can. It's promising at the moment, but it's definitely not finished. So there's definitely there's opportunities here to add some interesting things.
Yeah, and so I mean, part of what we were talking about with progression is in some of these areas. We're talking about I'm going to take a step back now. The Praetorian, we mentioned before how they have their own character sheets and levels and whatnot. That also does tie into the options that are available and how they work in the Legion battle system. Because if you're investing in certain Praetorians and giving them certain perks or leveling them up, that may add more flexibility or more survivability or better loot chance or whatever when you put them in charge of a particular Legion battle. So that's where these kind of metagame systems kind of tie together. There's also, I think, we hinted at this, but I want to circle back on it. Stratagems are also something that you can discover more of by leveling up and progressing. I think it's not the armory, but there's the
workshop.
The workshop, right? And so how does that tie into those two things as you progress?
There's a certain number of stratagems that you start with that are unlocked, so that you always have a full set of choices in each phase of battle. But as you build your workshop and you assign someone there to start improving the Legion's equipment and their training, you will unlock new cards where you get a set of new stratagems to choose from, and you have to pick one that gets added to the pool. It might not show up, but because it is randomized which stratagems you get each phase, but it improves your choices. And usually the cards you start with are less awesome than the ones you can unlock through the workshop. Then as you can upgrade the workshop, so once you get to, for example, Africa, you upgrade to the next tier of the workshop, which is called, that's not the armory, that's the something else. They have different names and they look different as well. Then you get to actually upgrade the existing cards. So it starts giving you options for which direction you want to specialize a particular stratagem in. And so there's 3 levels of upgrades. So it's a tree with 2 branches on each upgrade level. So it ends up being quite a lot of different stratagems in the end.
Yeah, it feels very progressive, which is cool. And this is an area of the game where it's a new system for the Expeditions franchise. So we've actually poured a lot of iteration into it. We're still iterating on it. We've done quite a few focus tests, and as we've done each focus test, I feel like we're zooming in more and more to realizing the vision we have here. So even some of the stuff we're talking about now, I'm sure that they will continue to evolve between now and release. But it's I don't know. It's just a super cool feature. So we have about 12 minutes left. I'm seeing on the clock. We got it's 48 after. So let's go into some questions.
Before we do that, though, Brad, you passed a certain milestone recently. So I've been told that we have some footage lined up to welcome you to your 40s.
I should have figured that the person who's in the production seat would do something like this. Yes, I just turned 40 last weekend and had a fun little 40th event. So that's
happy birthday.
Oh, thank you. That's very kind. Really appreciate that. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. It's now I'm rolling down the hill. I'm on the other side. So
You're
yeah. No, thank you very much. I appreciate it, everyone. That's really sweet of you. Thank you, Jonas and Alex. So let's go into some questions, and with the last little bit we have left. As I mentioned before, we always grab our questions from the community site. We're gonna grab some from stream too, but we encourage you to join the site and get plugged in. Our dev diaries always go up there, and I always look at them the night before, grab any questions, and we'll answer them on stream. So it's right down there on this side, I think, community.expeditionsseries.com, and really encourage you guys to go and join. And there's a lot more details even in the diary than we didn't have a chance to go through now, so I think you'll enjoy that. The first comment comes from from Vanny, and it's more of a statement than a question, but I thought it was really cool. He or she said, "The mechanics of controlling the Legion sound and look interesting. I hope the narratives and the missions that are tied into it feel similarly deep and worthwhile compared to the quests and writing and the rest of it." So cool. We're glad you're excited about it. I feel like we're I mean, I'm biased, but I feel like we're doing a lot of effort to try to organically tie everything together. We talked about that a little bit about the stream. So hopefully when you have a chance to play it, you'll get that sense coming through.
It is very much sort of the gameplay of Conquest drives the narrative forward in that sense. So I think it feels quite integrated. And sometimes we use the Legion in the missions as well, in the story missions. So yeah.
Yeah. But what I love about it is that that's never there's a lot of ranges for how that happens, so it always feels very natural as opposed to it's always going through. I mean, there are some things that are sequential because we have some structure to the game, so players can learn how to play this thing, and it's not always changing on them. But I feel like there's a nice level of diversity in how those moments pop up, so it does feel like there's just things happening in the world. Yeah. Another question that came from our community site is from Som. Som's had a number of questions. I can't answer all of them. I'm going to grab a few. We talked about this a little bit, but I'm going to just highlight it. He or she asks, "Does our Legion gain experience over time? If yes, how so? Do they level up? Do they perform better in combat? Access to better equipment?" I think we've talked about this in a few different ways during the stream.
I think we've pretty much gone over this. Yeah, there's an experience stat which has no upper limit, I think, so it can just keep growing. If they sit idle too long, it goes down again. And it is pretty much added 1-to-1. So 1 point of experience equals to one legionarius, meaning when you're very experienced, you can take on an army that's like 2 or 3 times as numerous as you are and still beat them because your people are that experienced. And then, as you mentioned, the stratagems are in a sense the institutional memory of your Legion leveling up as well. They gain access to more complicated maneuvers. They get more benefits from the maneuvers because they know how to execute them better and so on. So that represents the progression of your people.
Yeah. He also asks, he or she, and this is about, I think, the narrative part where it's like, are our Legion's accomplishments sometimes discussed in the narrative? So if they're successful, the people back home will praise our army, but if they're other way around, they'll shame it and they'll laud us for the performance of the campaign. So do you find that there is these, I think he's really asking about immersion and finding responsiveness from the world and how good or bad your Legion does in battles?
There isn't really an opportunity to do that because you kind of have to succeed at the conquest before you go back. So by the time you get back to Rome, you have already won the war. So there's no real opportunity for them to like shame you for losing or doing really poorly because you will always have lost, have been victorious, right? So that's not so much a thing that happens.
So I'm gonna paraphrase this, but is there opportunities where like you can use the Legion through narrative moments, like say like you can intimidate someone by threatening your Legion with them or things like that, or is there any kind of direct ties there?
I'm really glad that question came up because yes, there are dialogue options that are unlocked if your Legion is camped in that region. So if you're talking to someone in a certain region and your Legion is currently occupying that region, you will be able to basically say, "Why don't you come meet my 5,000 fighting men and maybe they can convince you to do what I want you to do." Yeah, we're hanging out right over here, right? Or basically strong arm someone using them. It does come up several times throughout the story. I don't want to oversell it. It's not something that happens all the time. But when it happens, it's extremely satisfying to just be able to say, "Look, you're going to do what I say or I will just invade. I will invade right now."
Right.
It's quite
And I
quite
think that's
fun.
part of. I mean, yeah, it definitely that. It's sometimes difficult to add those things infinitely in, but we've sprinkled a couple of them so you get that fantasy
Yeah.
across, which is really it's
I
immersive.
mean, it could quickly get quite easy if you could do it all the time. Like anytime you have to get anyone to do something, just I have a legion here, so you have to do what I say. That's
That's,
kind of
yeah,
overrides
well,
anything else.
that is very Roman, though, isn't it? I guess it kind
That's
of does.
true. That is true.
I'll go through some questions from earlier on the stream. So, let's see here. Rule in the Dwarf asks, will I always fight my own Legion battles, or will there sometimes be battles with allies or partners?
There are allied legions in some of the campaigns which can move independently of you and do their own stuff on the world map as well. I won't get too much into it. They behave differently depending on the narrative context, but you'll not always have to do all of the conquering yourself.
That said, Legion battles, the feature is designed specifically to be a 1v1. So it's one side versus one side. You're not bringing other sides into that battle and having different dynamics. It's a cool idea. Maybe if you guys all, if Rome is incredibly successful, we can expand Legion battles in a DLC or something. But for this version, it's really just 1v1. Sir Folwick asks, are there any prison systems in the game?
It's not so much a system, but you can capture certain characters after particular battles or combat encounters. Bring them back to your camp and interrogate them there. It's a story thing. It ties into the quests and it ties into the decisions that you make about how you want to treat these guys. Sometimes you have to make that decision during combat. How, like, which victory condition you go for will determine whether a certain enemy leader makes it out alive and can be captured, or just dies during the combat encounter, and then you can take it from there. So it's more of a narrative thing.
We already asked the question about losing areas that have already been conquested or conquered. Isma asked about will you be able to become more than a legate, like some kind of king like we did in Vikings? That's spoiler stuff. We can't. We're not going to respond on how your progression through the story go. I think you'll be excited about the different options that you have.
Watch the cinematic trailer. Maybe is all we should say.
I'm referencing that, so I'm just gonna,
Sure.
Yeah. Let's see. We answered about the time limit. We're not doing time limits. Hooray, no timers. Okay, so this is an interesting one. Unfortunately, the answer I think is no, but maybe there's something in there that I'm not familiar with. So, Ruling the Dwarf asks, are there scripted events on the map like the Mongol invasion in a Total War game that have a chance to happen or always happen during a playthrough that kind of impact some of these different metagame systems?
Not on those like large scale terms. No, as we've mentioned, you do get world map events, and they do occasionally tie into the Legion, the state of the Legion. Like you can have someone, your Legion gains morale for whatever reason, or some new people join you, and so on. So there are things that happen in that sense, and they are randomized. Although, if you play through the game normally, you're likely to see all of them. I think it's not gonna be a huge changing factor from game to game now.
We do have, though, we do have randomized world map events that show up that you have to resolve as a player, and they have different story elements to them. And I think that there's positive ones and negative ones. If you played the previous Expedition games, even in Vikings, those popped up when you're walking around or in Conquistadors. So there's there's a lot of different things that happen that are responsive to your adventure, and they're not always completely scripted as part of the direct narrative. So though it may not tie into the sense that you have like this other entity taking over the world that you have to deal with, there's still a lot of those dynamics that help keep things fresh and dynamic, even through multiple playthroughs. You're not going to always get the same layout of experiences or encounters or benefits or whatnot as you're progressing and exploring the different parts of the world.
The game is quite story driven in that sense. It would mess up the story quite a lot if the Mongols suddenly showed up in Egypt.
But don't always show up, right? Like
yeah, sometimes they show up.
Yeah, Mongols are kind of a big deal. If they show up, it probably is something you're gonna, have to deal with. I'm gonna grab two more quick questions. One here that says, "Are there characters?" Yet Trek asks, "Are there characters that are not companions but follow you around in the story?"
Yes.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, there are. They can both be story characters that join up for a while, or they can be the recruits that you hire from the Legion as your non-companion Praetorians that can be used to replace the companions. Most quests, you don't have to bring the companions. You could bring these characters instead.
And then one last question we're going to answer, and which is, this is Ismail again asks, will religion play some kind of focus in the game, like something we can exploit?
It's more of a story thing again. There aren't really any religion mechanics in the conquest system, but it certainly pops up quite frequently in the story, and the people that you encounter are religious as a matter of fact, because to them it's a given that the gods are real, and so that comes up quite a lot.
I think it kind of functions similar to how it has in previous games, where it's part of the morale system, where it's like some people may be more spiritual than others, and if you make decisions that are aligned with people that are spiritual, then you're going to find them happier, and the pragmatists may be less happy, and vice versa. So you have to kind of navigate that when it comes to like what kind of character are you role playing. And I think that's something that's really important to clarify, because a lot of these questions are centered around things that are definitely integrated into the narrative, because we really want you, as you're playing through Expeditions Rome, to make decisions about what kind of character you want to play in the fantasy, and then the fantasy will play out based on the decisions you're making for that character's personality traits and beliefs. And I mean, I honestly think this is a game that fans that really like it will probably play through more than once, because those decisions that you make and those fantasies that you're playing, whether you're a ruthless, a-religious, legatus, or if you're more of an honorable Roman that's trying to, we talked about before, the male versus female hero, they all have a dramatic impact on the story, the encounters you play, how the encounters are laid out, what decisions you get to make, and lots of different elements of the game. So though there's not systems around that, which may sound like it's not present, it absolutely shows up many, many times in the narrative, as lots of things do, and you have to make those choices based on the kind of character you're pretending you're fantasizing to be, which any good role-playing game should have. So hopefully you'll enjoy how that comes together. Well, everyone, I think that's the show. We're at the top of the hour now. Hope everyone had a good time. We had a lot of good questions, actually. So it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's nice.
Yep. I actually am not sure if we've picked our topic for the next Dev Diary, but it'll be coming in about 3 weeks or so. And we'll be revisiting with you then, and we'll hopefully have some new gameplay videos to show you. I know we've been showing some old stuff, but we're going to make a commitment to have some new gameplay video for you guys to see next week. So tell your friends if they want to see something cool and new on the next stream. Jonas, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having me. It's always great. Looking forward to the next one.
Yep. And everyone, you guys have a great next couple weeks. We really appreciate your time. As normal, plug into our community. We have our website, community.expeditionseries.com. We have Discord, Facebook, Twitter. Stay plugged in. You'll find all the new stuff. And we'll see you next time. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.